What's going on, everybody? You may have seen my review of the Matebook X Pro, which is indeed my daily. However, we now have a follow-up from Huawei that is actually same parts high-end update and mid-range compromise. After using and trying to use this laptop for a whole range of applications, it's time to ask the question, who is the Huawei Matebook 13 for? I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that this laptop is for MacBook haters. Now, I know what some of you might think about the design of this laptop. There are some obvious inspirations in the sleek metallic design and minimal layout. The cool metal construction makes this laptop just a hair thicker than the X Pro, but it has a slightly smaller screen and changes up some features. But when you take a step back and look at the laptop as a whole, it's hard not to make comparisons to Apple products that have a similar design and a similar bevy of features. The thing is, macOS is one of the main selling points of those laptops, but of course not everyone uses that on the daily and maybe they prefer Windows. Well, that's exactly what Huawei provided with this laptop. So I guess you can say that this laptop is a product for MacBook haters, but not really, because they want that design without everything else. But before we get too far into the Apple comparisons, let's look at the individual merits of a slim and portable laptop like this. It fits easily into a bag, and it's very low profile that people like students can bring it anywhere, including places like the cafe or the library, where they want to hunker down and get distracted by social media or YouTube instead of working. Just kidding, but not really. I mean, we all procrastinated like crazy in college, just admit it. Seriously though, much of what this laptop provides is very much in line with what a student might want out of a reliable, long-lasting laptop. Specs include Whiskey Lake Intel processors, either in i5 or i7 varieties, with the i7 including dedicated graphics in the form of an NVIDIA MX150. Those graphics are the same ones that are used in many Ultrabooks and help with light graphical work, so making presentations and editing things in things like Photoshop should be a breeze. There is either 256 or 512 gigabytes of onboard storage depending on which configuration you use, which is plenty of room for media and content. But one bottleneck you might experience is the RAM capacity, which is only at 8 gigabytes. I'll expand on that later, but for most students or even office professionals, that will be more than enough to multitask with web browsing and word processing comfortably. Another bottleneck for this laptop is in the battery capacity, which is 41.7 watt-hours, a pretty average number when you look at similar Ultrabooks in this segment. Now, the battery life on the Matebook 13 isn't really bad, and it can certainly work well for casual users who work with the power settings, but it is not an exceptional performer in this aspect. Of course, for those students writing essays, or really anyone that is clicking away on emails or text correspondence, a good typing experience is really paramount. The Matebook 13 brings an edge-to-edge keyboard with chiclet-style keys and minimal input travel required. Much like with its Pro variant, the Matebook 13 is a joy to type on for long periods of time. As a matter of fact, this is what I spend the most time doing on the Matebook 13, writing up scripts like the one you're hearing now. After all, it wasn't that hard to get up a good typing speed. One thing I always appreciate about this keyboard is the ability to lock those function keys. I know that a lot of laptops tend to have this, but seriously, I don't use the F-Row very often, so most of the time I keep that lock on so that I can just hit those buttons for things like screen brightness and volume control. One gripe I did have though has to do with that line, and it's the delete key over on the top right corner. It's very small, and it's right above the backspace key, and I would sometimes hit one when I really wanted to press the other. Alright, so we talked about bottlenecks, and now we're going to talk about how this laptop's not really for gamers. Earlier, I jokingly mentioned how you could use laptops like this to get distracted easily, and while true, the Matebook 13 is not actually fully equipped to do such a thing because it simply isn't for serious gamers. This is true for many Ultrabooks out there though, but doubly so for the mid-range compromise that this one makes. Once again, we see the disadvantage of having only 8 gigabytes of RAM. But another bummer here you're probably expecting me to mention if you saw my Matebook X Pro review is that the Matebook 13 does not have a Thunderbolt 3 port. This means that gamers who invest in eGPUs simply won't be able to use them with this laptop and will probably opt for something like the X Pro. In fact, it's as if the word Pro there just means more in this comparison. For instance, the Matebook 13 doesn't even have a full USB port to complement the 2 USB-C ports either. Because the compromises also make it hard for users to get the most out of the right choices made, like the MX150, for gamers and creatives alike. Despite having an updated version of the Whiskey Lake processor, again, it's that 8 gigabytes of RAM. I've already tried using things like Adobe Premiere Pro for videos like this on something with only 8 gigabytes of RAM. It is definitely not a good time. So you might want to go with more casual usage, and thus this laptop can be for media junkies. Opening up the laptop reveals a bit more bezel than before, and that is because the camera is no longer in a hidden button on the F-row, and is instead returned to above the screen in a more conventional area. The amount of bezel you get is still really respectable though, and that screen is still a joy to use for reading or watching just about anything. This is a 1440p touchscreen, but admittedly I rarely ever use the actual touch controls. Where the media does falter a bit is with the sound experience. The speakers are just not as loud or as rich as the ones that are mounted to the sides of the keyboard in the Matebook X Pro. It is more than enough for casual listening, but it won't fill a room. You can always use the headphone jack over on the left side near one of the USB-C ports though. So clearly this isn't a laptop particularly aimed at the enthusiast user. After all, typically users who need that high-end experience know exactly what they're looking for, and they will easily find that the Matebook 13 is lacking. Instead, this laptop is for the general user who wants to save a little bit of money by mindfully skimping out on a few of the details in order to get the most out of the key features that are included. And starting at $999, this kind of portability is often unheard of at that price. This review model with the i7 and the MX150 runs $1,299, which is still a great price for the extras that you do get. So finally, this laptop is for people who waited this long and didn't get the Matebook X Pro in the first place. There's a reason why I keep comparing this laptop to the Matebook X Pro, and it's not just because this is the follow-up to what was a well-regarded laptop in 2018. I wanted to put them head-to-head a bit more in this review to illustrate that I am that specific user, the kind that knows exactly what features I need for my experiences. But for any of you out there that decided to wait it out, perhaps the reason why is because you know you don't need Thunderbolt 3 or 16GB of RAM or even crazy speakers. And in losing those features, you thankfully don't have to sacrifice too much in order to save some funds. You still get an updated version of the Whiskey Lake processor, the NVIDIA MX150, quality of life features like a good performing keyboard, and a fingerprint reader embedded into the power button, and a great looking screen with as little bezel as possible without moving the camera to a weird chin facing spot. So the Matebook 13 might actually be perfect for you, because you still get everything else in a similar, sleek, MacBook kind of hating but not really design. And so there you have it, just some thoughts about the Matebook 13. It is the follow-up sort of to the Matebook X Pro. It's definitely the more budget option, but you still get a few features here that are still really great. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and call it on this video. If you are interested in checking out this laptop, I do have affiliate links down below. And of course, as it is with affiliate links, if you do click them and end up using those to buy products that I talk about on this channel, you're actually helping me out a little bit. So consider doing so if you are truly interested. You can also consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already. You can keep up with all of the content that I'm working on here at my channel, and look forward to some really awesome announcements coming out in the next few weeks. Not from me, from all of the different companies, because Mobile World Congress is coming up and I will be there. So as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you stick around, and if you do, you can look forward to my next video. Until then, I would just remind you to enjoy your tea, everybody.